This is the Practical One Study Guide Review, Part 1. We will be discussing lab equipment and safety. So on the screen here, you're seeing the lab study guide. We're going to go over the first portion. Here you'll see the first portion is lab equipment and safety. This is the lab equipment that you need to be able to identify. So this first one in the upper left-hand side, this is your eye wash bottle. In the upper middle picture, this is your broken glass container. The upper right-hand picture is your biohazard container. At the bottom left is your Sharps biohazard container. The center picture at the bottom is your fire blanket. And the bottom right-hand side is your fire extinguisher. So if I give you any of these pictures on a practical or a quiz and I ask you to identify it, you're going to tell me the name that is underneath each of these pictures. There is another picture I need to show you. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, there's a area in each of the laboratories here at the Panola College campus in Carthage. And these are different other safety equipment you need to know because they can be found in several different forms. So here we're seeing the eye wash station in the far left. In the center, this is our safety shower lever, and you would pull that lever down and a shower on the top and the ceiling would dump out a bunch of water in case, for instance, you were on fire. And the last portion of this on the right-hand side is our fire extinguisher. So make sure you can identify these as well as the pictures that we already went through. Hang on, let me get back to my other picture. Okay, now we're going to go to the laboratory equipment. Same as the safety equipment, you have to be able to identify these, but you also have another piece of information you need to know about each of these pieces of laboratory equipment, and that is the function. So we're going to start here at the upper right, or sorry, the upper left. The upper left is a picture of a beaker. So if I say identify this, you're going to tell me beaker. If I say identify the function of this piece of equipment, you're going to tell me transferring or holding liquids. So again, on number one, if I say identify this piece of equipment, you're going to tell me beaker. And number one, if I say identify the function, you're going to tell me transferring or holding liquids. On number two, if I ask you to identify number two, you would tell me the funnel. If I ask you the function of number two, you would tell me transferring liquids. Okay, number three, if I ask you to identify the piece of equipment, you would tell me a graduated cylinder. And if I ask you to identify the function, you would tell me to measure liquids accurately. Then on number four, if I ask you to identify this piece of lab equipment, you would tell me a flask. And if I asked you to identify the function of this piece of equipment, you would tell me holding liquids or making solutions. Now moving on to the next picture. This is some more lab equipment. So in this one, on number one, if I ask you to identify this piece of equipment, you would tell me a microscope slide cover. On number one, if I ask you to tell me the function, you're going to tell me to protect specimens from the microscope and vice versa. Then in number two, if I say identify number two, you would tell me these are dissecting scissors. If I ask you to tell me the function of number two, you would tell me to cut the dissection organism. Identify number three would be the microscope slide. Identify the function of number three would be to hold the specimen for viewing under the microscope. Identify number four. This would be a scalpel. Identify the function of number four would be to cut the dissection organism. And the biggest error when taking the practical is not answering the question asked. For instance, if right here on number 3, if I ask you to identify the function, some people will put dissecting scissors. So they're identifying the piece of equipment, but they're not answering my question, which is what is the function? If you answer the wrong question, you will get it wrong. So if I'm asking you the function, do not tell me these are dissecting scissors. Tell me that it's for cutting dissection organisms, and vice versa. If I ask you to identify these, meaning you should tell me dissecting scissors, but instead you give me the function, cutting the dissection organism, you'll also get it wrong. So make sure on these you are actually answering the question that is asked. Okay, moving on to our next set of pictures. This is more laboratory equipment. Okay, let me get my little pen again. Okay, identify number 1. This would be forceps. Identify the function of number 1 would be transferring or picking up small objects. Number 2, identify number 2 would be T-pins. Identify the function of number 2 would be holding down a section of a dissected organism. Identify number 3 would be a dissecting probe. Identify the function of number 3 would be pointing at a dissected organism. Identify number 4 would be an eyedropper. Identify the function of number 4 would be to transfer small amounts of liquids. Moving on to our next set of equipment. Number 1, identify number 1 would be dissection tray. Identify the function of number 1 would be to hold an organism during dissection. Identify number 2 would be gloves. Identify the function of number 2 would be to protect the hands. Identify number 3, this is a pipette. Identify the function of number 3 would be to transfer small amounts of liquids. Identify number 4, this would be a Bunsen burner. Identify the function of number 4 would be flame or fire source for heat or sterilization. Going down to our next set of equipment. Identify number 1. This is a test tube. Identify the function of number 1. This is to hold liquids in an experiment. Identify number 2. This is a test tube holder. The function of number 2 is to hold an individual test tube. Identify number 3. This is a test tube rack, and you will actually see a test tube right here placed in that test tube rack. The function of number 3 is to hold multiple test tubes. Identify number 4. Number 4 is a microscope. Identify the function of number 4 would be to magnify specimens. Some more lab equipment here as well. Identify number 1 would be a triple beam balance. Identify the function of number 1 would be to measure weights. Number 2, identify number 2 would be a hot plate. Identify the function of number 2 would be a heat source used to heat up liquids. Identify number 3, this would be a thermometer. Identify the function of number 3 used to measure temperature. Okay, so now we're going to go down to the different types of models used in the laboratory. This first picture right here, these are all organ models. So an organ model is just going to show one set of organs or one organ. So the first picture on the left here, or the first model on the left here, this is showing an eyeball. So that is one organ. The middle picture here is showing a kidney. So that is an organ model as well. This last picture on the right-hand side is showing a heart. So this would also be an organ model. Another kind of organ model would be a lung model. So if I had a model of 2 lungs, that would be an organ model. If I had a brain model, that also would be an organ model. So again, if I show you any of these pictures and ask you what kind of model this is, you would tell me an organ model. This picture here is showing a torso model. So torso just means that you're showing the main body. So if I showed you this model, you would tell me a torso model. Then we have another type of model that is not listed here, but you do have to know for your practical. That would be called a limb model, L-I-M-B. This would be a model of an arm or a leg. So again, if I show you a model of an arm or a leg and I ask you what type of model it is, you're going to tell me a limb model. Again, L-I-M-B, limb model. Now let's go down into safety. This is showing the safety diamond. So if I ask you what this is, you're going to tell me it's a safety diamond. In the safety diamond, the blue is for health, the red is for flammable, and the yellow is for reactivity. The white diamond down here at the bottom, I'm going to circle it for you. Let me pick this color. So right here, this white diamond, that is for special symbols. So that's going to be used to give us some information about special hazards that would go along with a chemical or a liquid found in the laboratory. These are some special symbols that can be found again in this white diamond. This special symbol here is no water, so you do not add water because it could explode or combust. The next one here is a biohazard. So in the biohazard, you're going to be looking for these 3 partial rings. Any combination of these 3 partial rings, they might look a little bit different in the pictures, but any combination of 3 rings is going to give you a biohazard warning. Radioactive, what you're looking for is a fan. So you can see 1, 2, 3 fan blades. If you see that 3 fan blades, you know that this symbol is radioactive. Oxidizer. Oxidizer is always going to show you a flame. So here you see our flame over a circle. That means oxidizer. Then down here, this one with air, with a strike through, this means it's going to react with air, so do not expose to air. Then this one at the bottom right that I'm circling really large, it looks like you have an explosion in the chest. This symbol is carcinogen, meaning that it's going to cause cancer. Okay, so you need to know all of these little symbols for the safety diamond. Okay, now I'm going to go to another screen share. Oops, hang on, wrong one. Right here. Okay. This is the safety diamond worksheet that is going to be in your practical number 1 module. So again, here you're seeing the safety diamond, and you have to know what each of these little colors is for. So again, blue is health, red is fire hazard, yellow is reactivity, and the white is for specific hazard. In each one of those, they can have numbers, and these are how you rate the numbers. So number 4 means it's extremely dangerous to the point of being deadly. Number 3 would mean extremely dangerous. Number 2 would be moderately dangerous or moderately hazardous. A number 1 would be slightly hazardous or slightly dangerous. And 0 would mean no hazard or danger. So if you get a rating of number 1, number 1 does have a danger to it, but it's slight. Okay. The only time you would have no danger or no hazard is if the number is 0. Now we've gone over some of these safety hazard symbols, but there's a few more that we have to know for our practical. Okay, again, this first one with the W with the strike through, that means do not add water. The air with the strike through means do not expose to air. Then all of these here, you're seeing the 3-bladed fan, so those mean radiation. And then all of these at the bottom, I'm going to circle in red here, all of these are biohazard. And remember, biohazard, I told you that these 3 rings, they're 3 partial rings, 3 arcs, if you will. If you see those 3 arcs or partial rings, then you know it's biohazard. So the reason I put these here is so you could see that they look a little bit different, but they have the same basic image in them. Then going down, these are some more images that you need to know for your practical. Up here you see, up in the upper left-hand corner, you see looks like a fish that's lying upside down. This means dangerous to the environment. Then in the upper middle right here, this is toxic. That's the skull and crossbones. Then in the upper right, you're seeing a tube with looks like a wick coming out of it. This means gas under pressure. Then the middle left, this is corrosive. You see it's pouring onto the hand here. So that image is corrosive. Then in the very center, this one looks like it's exploding. This means explosive. Then in the middle right-hand side, this one is flammable. You can see the flames coming up. Then down at the bottom left with the exclamation point, this means caution. Then again, the circle with the flames above it, this means oxidizing. And then this one in the bottom right, looks like the chest is exploding. That means carcinogen. So be able to recognize and identify each one of these for your lab quiz and your lab practical. Now we're going to practice some of these safety diamond questions just so you get more of a feel for what's going on. Okay, so in number 1 here, we have a 3 in the blue. So that 3 would mean highly or extremely dangerous or extremely hazardous. The 0 in the red means there's no flammability risk. Then the 1 in the yellow means it has a slight reactivity risk. And there are no special symbols, so there's no special warnings here. In safety diamond number 2, in the blue, remember blue means health, so there is a moderate risk or a moderate hazard of health hazard. The number 4 in the red means it's extremely or deadly risk of fire. Number 3 in the yellow means it's an extreme reactivity risk. And the W down here in the special symbols block means do not expose to water or do not add water. The safety diamond here in number 3, there is a 0 health risk. In blue, in red, there's a 0 fire risk, and in yellow, there's a 0 reactivity risk. Then going down into number 4, in number 4, the 4 in the blue means there is a deadly health risk. And the red, there is a 0 flammability risk. And the yellow, there is a deadly reactivity risk. And the skull and crossbones down here in the special symbols means toxic. Then in number 5, this safety diamond, there is a 1 in the blue. This means there's a slight health risk. There is a 4 in the red, which means there's a deadly fire risk. And there's a 2 in the yellow, which means there is a moderate reactivity risk. Then you see this 3-bladed fan in the special symbols block. This means radioactivity. Okay, what does this W symbol mean? This means do not add water. Number 7, the blue diamond represents health hazards. The yellow diamond, remember the yellow diamond up above, what does it represent? It represents reactivity hazard. Number 9, is a hazard of 2 less or more dangerous than a hazard of 4? It is a less dangerous hazard. Remember, you go from 0, which means no danger, to 4, which is deadly. So the lower the number, the less the risk. What does a hazard of number 2 mean? Number 2 means there's a moderate risk or a moderate hazard. A hazard of 0 means what? It means there is no hazard or is no risk. And then at the bottom of this, there are the answers. And again, this document is going to be found in your Practical 1 module. So you can go back over these. Okay, now we're going to go back to our study guide. So we finished all these special symbols, and we're going to go on to the microscopes in part 2. So we're going to end this discussion here.